Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. Super excited to be here. So just to jump right into it. ACCESS NYC's goal is to save people time navigating the alphabet soup of government and lessen the learning costs of understanding safety net related programs. Its two main features include screening, an up to 10-step questionnaire that filters for high-level eligibility for city, state, and federal programs based on self-reported information, and program guides, which are plain language information about programs in 11 languages covering what they offer, their value proposition, eligibility factors, what they require in terms of documentation and potential effort, and how people can take action and get assistance. It does not integrate into any online application systems for the programs themselves, but really serves to act as a convenient source of actionable information. Let's take a quick look at how screening works. You can try it out yourselves if you want to follow along on access.nyc.gov or on your phone. So if you go to the site and just click on "Am I eligible?" we'll go through a very self-guided reporting process where we can note what types of specific resources we may be trying to access. This isn't going to affect the results that we see, but just merely prioritize the order of the results that we see. So just to get started, I'll check off cash and expenses, food, housing, and work. Hit the continue button, agree to the disclaimer, add some information, say live in Sunset Park, and I'll say that I'm unemployed. Moving further along, I don't have an income at the moment. Let's add an expense of rent for about $2,000 a month. And then add a household of about 3 people. I'm the head of household. I'll add a child who is 8, and they are a student. Continuing through the process, I will add a parent. So a grandparent of the child. They're also unemployed. And I'll say that this household is renting in a rent-controlled or rent-stabilized apartment. And let's just say that I and my parent are on the lease. So once we go through that process, entering these details about the household, we can see all the information we've entered so far, see a summary, make edits if we want to make any changes. And once we click yes, continue to my results, we'll get taken to a results page where we'll have a couple of different options. We'll have the option to text and email ourselves the results, and we'll also see the results of programs that our household may potentially be eligible for. Scrolling down, we'll see a number of different options. We can learn more or learn how to apply to the program. If I just click through and click the Learn More button, I'll get taken to the program guide, which breaks down information about the program using the standardized format of, again, the value proposition, key information, high-level eligibility factors, documents that will be needed to be included within any application or start of a process, and how to apply. Any sorts of information about different methods of application that the program may offer for application. Is there an online application? Is there a way to apply by mail or start the process through a phone call, and so forth? And then lastly, any ways that there might be assistance available for the program. Typically, we'll have information about the main website from the administering agency, as well as any sort of hotline or web portal information for tech support help. And just moving back into the slides and continuing on. We've also made the screening logic that powers the screener and content for the program guides available as open resources through the NYC Benefits platform. And for some more background about how all this came to be, in 2006, the original ACCESS NYC launched. It was an innovation of its time in New York City government. Around 2016, the NYC Mayor's Office for Economic Opportunity saw an opportunity to make it easier to use and easier to maintain. We split safety net information and screening functionality from the site, which was primarily managed by the New York City Human Resources Administration, into a newly redesigned product that was going to be mobile first, accessible, tested with users, and human translated into the city's 10 most popular non-English languages. And the original ACCESS NYC rebranded to ACCESS HRA and still focuses on electronic services like the actual online applications and enrollment programs for HRA administered services like SNAP or food stamps and cash assistance or TAMP. The new ACCESS NYC and its content dataset shipped in 2017. The API launched in 2019. And we've been working with Ethan's team at the NYC Office of Technology and Innovation to patch and update the rules engine and related API infrastructure. OTI is using our open resource for MyCity, an in-development product that seeks to go beyond ACCESS NYC's scope. And so how do we do all this? All the content for the program guides and that screening eligibility logic goes through a review process with our partners from over 90 governmental units, our liaisons. We collaborate using an editorial workflow and content management tool called Gather Content. And this content is pulled into our products, which are WordPress websites. And then we publish that content publicly as a data set here. And the screening criteria is implemented as machine-readable logic in rules. It's the rules engine that powers the screener and is available through the API. And going into a little bit more detail into our process, when we look at information and emerging programs for ACCESS NYC, we look at a number of different considerations and factors, including governmental jurisdiction, the availability to New York City residents regardless of geography, the actionability and the entry point for the general public or folks in the community. We consider the impact and intent of the program on poverty alleviation and equity. And we also consider the expected duration and availability of the program or service. And all this information gets drafted, goes through multiple review processes, gets published, gets translated, and we work with our liaisons to update this information on a cyclical basis. Moving from there, we'll then consider and evaluate programs that have been published as program guides for suitability in the screening process. Some considerations around that will include, does the program or benefit have explicit and transparent eligibility criteria? And we'll consider the degree to which any sorts of screening or filtering can happen against the current questions that we have in the screener. Moving on from there, to develop the screening logic, we'll interpret these explicit income thresholds, explicit requirements as conditional logic. We'll develop test scenarios with different types of household incomes and expenses, and we'll use an automated testing tool called Ghost Inspector to be able to run different types of scenarios to ensure that the screening results are being returned as expected based off of all that criteria. We'll publish this and we'll test a lot again, and we'll go through a similar maintenance and update cycle working with our liaisons and software development. Here's an example of screening logic for a program with super simple conditions, the Child Independent Care Tax Credit. For screening purposes, we simply just look at, is there a child under the age of 13 in the household? And does the household member have an expense type related to child care, dependent care? And then here's a chart we've published which documents the parameters of inputs or the types of questions we ask and really map how do those different types of answers account for the potential eligibility for specific programs. So while ACCESS NYC focuses on comprehensive screening, this chart, which is much larger than what I'm showing now, really seeks to visualize the different types of inputs that are being considered for screening purposes. At the end, I'll share some links to this and some other resources we've published. And so now I'm going to hand it off to Ethan to dive a bit further into the rules engine itself and the API.
Awesome. Thank you, Song. All right. Just pulled up my screen. So what I'd love to tell you a little bit about is the screening API that's a part of the NYC Benefits platform. This is something that relates very closely to ACCESS NYC, but can actually be considered kind of a backdoor to access the logic that ACCESS NYC is the front door for. This API is powered by AWS, Amazon Web Services, and it itself is very simple. It is using industry best practices. It's REST-based. It's very simple. It's privacy friendly and doesn't store any data. And the way it works is that we have two different types of data, household data and person data. You saw Song go through the ACCESS NYC path beforehand. Similarly, the API has the same types of data, which are then passed to AWS Lambda and the Drools Business Rules Management System, which is an open source Apache product that effectively manages rules as code. This gets then passed, once processed, passed back to the user as eligibility data. And now the API user knows, based upon their household income, their household data, including income, person data, et cetera, what programs they're eligible for. Now let's see this in action. If I go to this link, this is a really nice site kind of documenting the entirety of the screening API, including the different endpoints and request builder. What we can do is go in here and enter in some household and person data. In the interest of time, I'm not going to do that right now, but effectively what I can go through here is go and generate a JSON. I've already done that and taken that JSON and put that into this sample API request. So what we're going to do is make a request, a live request to our sandbox with this JSON. I'm going to send it over. And in the headers, there's already an auth token. We've already prefetched an auth token, so we know that I'm authenticated. And I can see that, okay, awesome. The request was successful, and these are the eligible programs that this particular person in this household is actually eligible for. Now, how does this work on the back end? Well, I'm really excited to show you the actual rules as code in the Drools, aka Business Central workbench. This is how it is actually represented. And this is written in a language called MVEL, which is an expression language that can run on the Java runtime environment. But what's important to look at here is that we've set up entities, household, person, that you can see over here on the left, that have these particular properties. And we've written code to make sure that for this particular program, which is the Administration for Child Services Child Care Voucher Program, you have to pass these particular rules. You must live in NYC, you must have a person below the age of 13 that is a child or stepchild. And so if we go in here and we look at our persons, we have currently two persons, one 20-year-old and one 2-year-old. And we can see down here that we have Child Care Voucher as one of the eligible programs. So if we just bump this up to 22, send it over, we'll see that that Child Care Voucher is no longer there. Yay, live demo. It actually works. So what's actually really exciting about this is that this is in production and has been in production. We're doing a little bit of infrastructure work right now to get it up and running, kind of get it back up and running. But I think one of the really interesting things is kind of looking at it as a consumer of the API. My team at the Office of Technology and Innovation is working on the MyCity portal, which is a single one-stop shop for all city services and benefits. We're currently in development, but what is really interesting is that when we started, we wanted to take a look at all the different technology assets across the city. And one of the things that popped out at us was the ACCESS NYC tool, but also the API. In particular, the public API was incredibly helpful for us as a new project that wanted to reuse this logic. It was super easy to discover. Literally, we typed in NYC benefits, and then ACCESS NYC was the first thing. We didn't have to go talk to different people in different agencies and figure out what they knew. We just Googled it. It's super easy to integrate. We can just do a REST call versus writing a custom integration with some backend with FTP and SFTP tooling and all of that fun stuff. Like it takes like less than a week for an engineer to implement. And then I think what's also really important is that we were able to reuse business logic and have that logic live in a single source of truth that the ACCESS NYC team owns. So we in OTI don't need to manage this. We don't have to recreate anything. Song's team has already created the processes to not only create these rules, but also to maintain these rules. And we as OTI, as the MyCity developers, can tap into that directly. And that's something that is not unique to MyCity. Basically, the NYC benefits platform is an open platform that allows ACCESS NYC, MyCity, other sites like Growing Up NYC, and many other tools, the access to these services and the criteria to create new tools whenever necessary. So that's a little bit about the API. I'm super excited. MyCity is working really closely with the ACCESS NYC team, and we'll have something really exciting to show you soon. Back over to you, Song.
Great, thanks. Here's a slide with a bunch of resources, which I'm sure will be shared afterwards. And now entering Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing your work and project with us. I'd like to now open it up to the audience to ask any questions or share any comments you may have. Don't forget to drop your questions in the chat and use the raise hand feature. I'll be happy to call on you to ask our presenters some questions that you may have. And I think started off, we already had a question from Melanie Lavelle. Is ACCESS NYC doing anything about redetermination for health insurance post public health emergency?
That's a great question, Melanie. At the moment, ACCESS NYC is really scoped for discovery and awareness at the initial steps of enrolling and understanding what goes into the enrollment process. So we're not currently integrated into the existing services or re-enrollment processes of any program or service offering.
Thank you. Mary Pat, I see your hand is raised. You can unmute yourself and ask your question.
All right, thank you so much. Two questions. The first one is, I saw in the earlier part of the demo, you had a feedback button in the lower right. I'm wondering if you could tell us really quickly what that does and what you do with the information. And then that is related to, I think, maybe the second question, which is one of the things I think about is that we don't know what we don't know. And what data do you use, or what data is used to try to figure out which populations may not be being reached by this information? So thank you.
Great question. So to address your first question about the feedback button, on all the program guides on ACCESS NYC, if anyone wants to click the feedback button, we just simply ask, is this page helpful? Why or why not? This is just a simple, lightweight way of us getting one-way feedback of just understanding, is there anything missing? Are people confused about the information that we have on the site? The site is very heavily trafficked. Anecdotally, pre-pandemic, it could receive upwards of 100,000 unique users or visitors a month. And this just simply allows us to collect more information around the clarity of the program guides that we're writing at scale. And based on that information, we make modifications. In a lot of cases, there's often like customer service inquiries or questions going deeper into the service. Where possible, we'll try to escalate them with agencies or just try to validate the types of concerns that may come up. With regards to your second question, not knowing what we don't know and what data can we potentially use to reach people, we do have a breadth of data around basic web analytics, just understanding how people are discovering the information on the site, what referral links are coming through. It's majority through government resources, and then also majority through just organic search. I think because we're not collecting information actually related to people going through the application process, we still do have high-level information about people that are interested in programs, and this is information that we work to share with our liaisons, who are actually the program administrators of these agencies, so they have a better sense of the number of traffic we're driving their way, and how they're discovering information through ACCESS NYC. We've learned a lot of interesting things, a lot of things specifically around multilingual SEO and how having professional, high quality, human translated content goes a long way in having higher search results to reach populations online in their preferred languages.
Thank you. Margaret, I'm gonna pass it to you to ask our last question, but I wanna ask a question that came earlier in the chat. Song and Ethan, as you built this, were you able to see where there were opportunity to align eligibility policy, for example, income requirements across the program? And that was from Jeremiah, if I'm not mistaken.
I might pass this to Ethan at a high level to see if he has any initial thoughts, given that he spent a little bit of time just working with the API and helping us patch things up, and is considering a lot of interesting opportunities around MyCity, but no spoilers.
Yeah, I'll try to speak around anything that I'm not supposed to reveal, but I think there are certainly opportunities. I mean, we're currently working with 2 different programs for our first launch of MyCity, and we noticed that actually the applications for both of them are the same form, but they're across 2 different agencies. And so there's definitely some opportunity here to discover both the eligibility, kind of similarities in eligibility and similarities in applications. And because we have all of that as code, it's incredibly easy to go in and look at very explicitly, like, what are the rules? There's no need to like wade through a ton of prose to look at it. So it's super trivial to pull up 2 different programs and look at the eligibility requirements side by side and just see that determination. So there's definitely an opportunity and something that we're looking at definitely on the MyCity side as we go forward.
Thank you so much. We're at time, but Margaret, I'm gonna have you ask your question really quickly and then we'll move into our next portion.
Awesome, thanks so much. Yeah, this was fantastic. And I'm wondering what your experience was with the rules representation, and 2 aspects to the question. You know, was it easy for policy experts to understand that, I guess, the MVEL, the expression language that the rules were represented in? And then what was the learning curve for your developers in getting up to speed on the Drools platform and learning all the ins and outs of that? Thank you.
That's a great question. I think to speak to your first question around the experience with policy experts in Drools, at the moment, we're really working to translate the policy requirements into simple conditional statements, really more like, if a household has X amount of income based on these income thresholds, do they meet this condition and or these other circumstances? And that's sort of the general high level format of a lot of the eligibility interpretation. At the moment, there's no access to the actual policy experts to take a close look at the Drools formatting themselves. Something that the NYC Opportunity Team is actively exploring right now is potential refactoring away from Drools at some point in the near future and moving towards something that might be a little bit easier to understand from a plain language level and a non-developer level. And also to your second point around development and experience using the Drools engine, something that may be easier for web developers who have more modern web development skills to be able to pick up and build off of. That said, we've been super excited and grateful to have OTI's partnership in patching and updating our infrastructure. And so I might pass it off to Ethan to speak to his experience working a bit with at least updating the infrastructure and peeking at the rules so far.
Yeah, I'll keep it super short. Basically, I think Drools is a really interesting sort of distributed tool that is super opinionated. So once you set it up, you really don't need to interact with the actual infrastructure. The primary interaction is going to be through that workbench. That being said, once you go into the workbench, I think it is very targeted towards developers. You need to explicitly write the rules. You're going through a Git workflow. You are like building entities and like entity relationships. So it's very, very much developer centric. And it would be interesting to have more of a domain specific language for this case that's not so like in the weeds Java-y and a little higher level so that non-developer can directly interact with it. So I think that's a potential improvement there, but as it is, it's already very useful.